Vishnu Paramaham Sabhavara Jigacharya Sadasi Sivadesi Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Namachar Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prayam Sagahal Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopita Shama Kunda Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Navadvip Dham Ki Jai Ganga Shamuna Tulasi Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Go Preman all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gurung, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Yasoda Nandana Brajana Ranjana Yaskira Vandachari Jamuna Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya. Acharya also does this with AC. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Namachar Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Sagahal Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Sri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopita Shama Kunda Radha Kuta Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Navadvip Dham Ki Jai. Ganga Jamuna Tulasi Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Go Premanandi. All glories to the devotees, all glories to the devotees, all glories to the devotees, all glories to Sri Guru and Sri Guranga, all glories to Sri Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Prachadane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarane Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sri Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare. Read from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 87, Verse 3. Shaisha Upanishad Brahmi Purvesham Purvajadhrata Shradaya Daraya Yastam Kshemam Gachat Akinchanaha. Brahmi, related to the absolute truth. Purve Sham, of our predecessors. Purvajay, by the predecessors. Dhrita, meditated upon. Shradaya, with faith. Darayat, meditates. Ya, whoever. Tam, upon it. Kshemam, ultimate success. Gachat, will attain. Akinchana, free from material connection. Translation: those who came before, even our ancient predecessors, meditated upon the same confidential knowledge of the absolute truth. Indeed, anyone who faithfully concentrates on this knowledge will become free from material attachments and attain the final goal of life. Purport: this confidential knowledge concerning the absolute truth should not be doubted, since it is being passed down through authoritative lines of learned sages from time immemorial. One who cultivates the science of the Supreme with reverence, avoiding the distractions, a fruit of rituals and mental speculation, will learn to give up the false designations of material body and mundane society, and thus he will become eligible for perfection. In the opinion of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti, the first two verses of this chapter can be considered as Upanishad on the topic of Brahman. Sukadeva Goswami here disclaims authorship on the grounds that this Upanishad was spoken previously by Narada Muni, who himself heard it from Sanaka Kumara. Translation: those who came before, even our ancient predecessors, meditated upon this same confidential knowledge of the absolute truth. Indeed, anyone who faithfully concentrates on this knowledge will become free from material attachments and attain the ultimate, the final goal of life. So what is this confidential knowledge of the absolute truth, which is here the translation of Upanishad Brahmi. So of course Upanishad means in one sense Upanishads, which are a type of scripture, a Vedic scripture, part of the Srutis. So the Srutis are regarded as eternal, whereas Smritis are produced at some point in time. So there's technically no author for the Shrutis, though they themselves talk about how certain sages revealed them. In every day of Brahma, the same words appear, and in a previous Brahma's lifetime, the same Vedas were theirs without any change, whereas Puranas and things are bound to change with different days of Brahma and whatever, the words change. Meaning is ultimately the same, but they're given special reverence because of that. So within the Vedas, we have different sections for different types of people. And we can't equate them and say they're all equal, but according to qualification, different types of people are qualified for different types of knowledge and different types of goals and different types of processes. So some children are qualified for elementary school, some are qualified for high school, some are qualified for college, some are qualified for graduate degree. So different people will go to different levels. But the goal ultimately is that one should progress from one to the other, just as one should start in first standard and go up to college or whatever. So one should also go from one qualification to the others in the Vedic literature. And so the first qualification is the Karma Kanda. So this is rules and regulations and sacrifices for controlling the senses and elevation in the material world, going to Svarga Loka, developing Sattva Gun, etc. So the Vedas deal with this. And from this we also get Karma Yoga, which deals with the whole social system of Varnashram to help you get your Artha and Kama fulfilled through rules of Dharma. So all of this we can say is Karma Kandesha, and that's a goal is refined enjoyment within the material world, which is better than sinful enjoyment in the material world. So it's to take you away from sin and restrict you, but at the same time give you a little bit of enjoyment so that you won't rebel. So this is the lowest system based on enjoyment, enticement of higher enjoyment. So there's a huge section of the Vedas devoted to this, and there's a huge section of people who follow this. And they consequently developed a whole philosophical system called the Karma Mimamsa philosophy, of which one of the spokesmen is Jaimini, a great sage. So he wrote many works praising this system and saying it's absolute, it's the highest, you don't have to do anything else, etc. Okay? And he developed a lot of followers. Even in Shankar's time, there were a huge group of Karma Mimamsakas. So that is one prominent section of the Vedas. The other prominent section is called the Jnana Kanda. So we have the Karma Kanda, and then we have the Jnana Kanda. And this consists of Upanishads, which there are attached to different Vedas. So a certain number of Upanishads are attached to the Rig Veda, some to the Yajur Veda, some to the Atharva Veda, some to the Sam Veda. And the Vedas themselves, we can say, are the verses of the Vedas, which are called the Upasana Kanda. the Samhita section, like the Purusha Shukta and those type of prayers. The Karma Kanda is basically a bunch of rules, how to use the mantras from the Upasana Kanda for sacrifices, etc., like that. So it's basically not verses, it's more instructions on how to use mantras to get material desires fulfilled. So the Gyan Kanda tends to be verses, but some things are in prose also. Not always verses, but this is Gyan Kanda. So the topic is mainly higher knowledge. And from this we get knowledge about how to reject Karma Kanda and go for Brahman, etc. So some of these Upanishads seemingly support the impersonal Brahman, liberation as the goal, rejecting material world and Karma Kanda, etc., and generally considered to be higher than the Karma Kanda. So that is how the Brahma Sutra starts, Atato Brahma Jigyasa. So now, after having studied and experienced the results of Karma Kanda, then you get tired of that, and then you become inquisitive about Brahman, and then you go to Gyan Kanda, and you study Upanishads. So the Brahma Sutras are considered to be the commentary on the Upanishads, so we can understand them. So Brahman is the subject of the Upanishads, whereas Svargaloka is the subject of the Karma Kanda. So it's a little bit different. It's non-material. However, though we can take Gyan Kanda as, Jnana Yoga, study Upanishads to get liberation, mukti, impersonal Brahman, realization, etc., there are also Upanishads which explain, and even the same Upanishads that talk about Jnana, they also talk about bhakti. So we will have descriptions of the Supreme Lord there, and that one should surrender to the Supreme Lord. And our acharyas give many verses to show that, even from the Upanishads that Shankaracharya quotes. So they're from the Mundaka Upanishad. We'll have statements about how the Purusha is supreme, not impersonal Brahman, but Purusha, he is supreme. And then we have verses that show that the Lord will reveal himself to certain people, certain devotees. And of course, that means that through devotion, then the devotee gets mercy and he can realize the Lord. And we have whole sections of the Svetasvara Upanishad which deal with the Purusha and glorify the Purusha, etc. So we have many verses also within the Upanishads that explain about that Bhagavan or Paramatma. So not only Brahman is discussed in Upanishads. So we get some Upanishads will talk about Brahman, and other Upanishads or parts of Upanishads will talk about Bhagavan. So we have Bhakti also. So we have Jnana Yoga and Bhakti Yoga expressed in the Jnana Kanda. So these are the Upanishads. So here talks about Upanishad Brahmi. So Brahmi, of course, means concerning Brahman, and Upanishad relates to these certain works, the Upanishads, the higher section of the Vedas. So the original question was in verse 1, how do the Shrutis, which generally deal with material things, describe Brahman without qualities and which cannot be described? So how can the Vedas express that? So parts of the Vedas are not even dealing with that subject at all. They're dealing with Karma Kanda. So okay, if they can deal with the material world and talk about Svargaloka, etc., no problem. But then the Upanishads directly deal with this Brahman. But then what is this Brahman? This is the whole topic. So Brahman sometimes is described as nirguna, anirdesha. You cannot describe it as no qualities, etc. Very impersonal. But in other places, it's synonymous with Purusha, Supreme Lord, who has qualities and form, etc. And we have descriptions of that Purusha in the Upanishads also. So it has both meanings, the impersonal and the personal. And therefore, when the Brahma Sutras talks about, and now we have to after studying Karmakanda and tiring of the results of material activities and the enjoyments of the material world, you should graduate and then inquire about Brahman. So our acharyas will say, what is that Brahman? It means Bhagavan. It doesn't mean the impersonal. Huh? So in other words, the whole of the Brahma Sutras is analyzing Brahman in similar words and telling us that it is Bhagavan, not the impersonal. Whereas Shankaracharya will analyze the whole Brahma Sutras in terms of impersonal. So for the Vaishnavas then, the interpretation of Brahman is not the impersonal at all, it's the personal aspect of God. And then the Upanishads, of course, explain different aspects of Brahman and difficult passages and explain them, etc. And through this, we understand that ultimately the whole goal is to realize this form of the Supreme Lord, Bhagavan. So all of this is within the Vedas, within the Shrutis, and particularly the Upanishadic section, dealing with Brahman, that highest entity. So often in the translations they call this Brahman the absolute truth, or a little bit abstract philosophical term for it, because many philosophers and other people, when they study Upanishads, they're not thinking of Brahman as Bhagavan, they're thinking of it as some abstract entity like that, and ultimately impersonal. But for the devotee then, the absolute truth means Bhagavan, who's a person with qualities and activities and attractive features. So the statement here is that this knowledge about Brahman, which is conveyed through the Shrutis, in particular Upanishads, was previously also passed down and meditated upon. And through this, one can actually attain, it says, Kshemam, which means benefit. So this means the highest benefit, not some material benefit. We get the highest benefit from this. So we not only get knowledge, but with that knowledge, then we can have realization. So, of course, the whole import of jnana and of bhakti is a goal beyond matter. And the question is asked here at the beginning, how can material words indicate and give us guidance on something which is immaterial? So the statement here is that, yes, it can do so. The Vedas can give us proper knowledge by which we can get out of the material world. Even though it looks like the words are material, they get us out of the material world. So that is the we can say the implication of this particular statement here. So the as was mentioned in the previous verse, it mentioned how Sukadev did not speak directly and just say, well, the Vedas can speak about the absolute truth because the Vedas actually are not material words at all, and they're a Shakti of the Lord. He doesn't say that at all. He speaks indirectly. And then he gives another answer, says the Lord is the creator of the material world in the senses, and therefore the jivas can use their mind, intelligence, senses, prana, body, etc. for enjoyment or for liberation. That's all he says. So he doesn't directly answer the question at all. But the implication is that because there is a Supreme Lord, and not impersonal Brahman, and there is a real world with real jivas and real senses, etc., the Lord has made an arrangement for the jivas to get out of the material world. And he can do that because he's the Supreme Lord. He creates everything. He arranges everything. So he can make arrangements for the jivas to get out of the material world, even if we use so-called material means. It doesn't matter. The Lord can do what he can do because he has the Shakti. So that's the implication. But he doesn't say that directly. He gets this parokshavad, indirect statement. So, the Upanishads also use a lot of parokshavad. They do not speak directly. And that is why it is contentious. The impersonalists will take the same Upanishad and analyze it and come out with completely impersonal thing. Then the Vaishnavas will come out with a different meaning, completely different, and they'll argue over the meaning because the Upanishads do not speak directly. They tend to disguise things. So in one place they will talk about the Brahman being nirguna, anirdeshya, nirakar, etc. And then other places they talk about the Purusha, the great Purusha who creates the material world, etc. So they say both things, so it's a little confusing. So therefore we can only approach that truth by very careful examination. And as is stated here, there were predecessors and predecessors to those predecessors who passed down this knowledge. So the knowledge is there, but then we also have to receive it and get the proper explanation of it. Otherwise, we misinterpret it and we come out with the wrong conclusion, and then we don't get the goal at all. Therefore, the knowledge is there, but it is somewhat hidden. Why is it hidden? So that was also answered in the quote from Krishna himself, where he says, I also like the system of indirect speech. So the Lord also doesn't like to say things directly. He will also say things indirectly. One justification, of course, is that knowledge is rahasya, it is secret. And therefore, only people of a certain qualification get that knowledge. Therefore, the Vedic knowledge is banned for the Sudras. They're not supposed to study the Vedas at all. Then they have another form that is Puranas and Mahabharata, etc. They can study that, but they can't study Vedas. So Vedas is more rahasya, requires higher qualification, higher intelligence, etc. So certain things are rahasya, secret, and therefore they are disguised. Sometimes things are not spoken directly, and that is to hide the knowledge from unqualified people. So though the Bhagavatam is a direct explanation, being a Purana, it's for the people of Kali Yuga to give them in a more clear manner the highest truth, so it's not rahasya in that sense. Still, certain aspects are rahasya because unqualified people should not get access to it. And that's particularly when we come to statements on rasa and things like that. So therefore, even in the Bhagavatam, we will have sections which are also parokshavad. They are also indirect, hidden. And if we take the superficial meaning, we may get impersonalism out of it. So we have to be very careful how we go through the Bhagavatam as well. So that is why even for the Bhagavatam we also need a predecessor and a predecessor and a predecessor. We need a parampara in order to get the correct meaning, to explain the parokshavad sections of the work. So therefore the knowledge is there, but whether it is Shruti or Smriti, we do need a system of parampara to give us the proper understanding of the words. And then if we get the proper understanding, then we can actually attain the goal. If we don't have the proper understanding, we don't get that goal. We don't get that kshemam expressed in this particular verse. So, therefore, the subject matter is there within the Vedic literature, and at least a portion of the Vedic literature, and it had a practical result. Obviously, by saying that the people got the benefit of this, they got the final result. That is, they got beyond the material world, either through jnana or through bhakti, but they got a result. Therefore, the words were valid. They had some effect. They were useful for those particular persons. So, simply because they looked like material words, they had a use, and they produced a proper result. Now the question will come, how can something material give a spiritual result? It should be limited to material things, and that is very true. Material things will only give material results. Material words give material results, give material knowledge. Material endeavors give material goals. Definitely. And Krishna also says in Bhagavad Gita, you're trapped in this material world and you can't get out by normal material means. Mama Maya Dharatyaya. You can't use Maya to get out of Maya. You can't get out of ignorance by ignorance. That's very, very true. So then, how do we get out of the material world? Even jnana is sattva gun. So technically, by jnana, you cannot get liberation. So that's also a problem. If jnana were spiritual, then the jnani would not give up the process of jnana after liberation, but he gives it up because it's material. So then how can jnana give liberation? So the answer is it can't. So what gives liberation? Supreme Lord. And process of bhakti give liberation even to the jnani. It is not the jnana that gives it, it's the bhakti that gives it only. Therefore, nothing material actually can get you beyond the material. So it has to be something else. So for bhakti again, then to get out of the material world and get to the spiritual world again, it is something non-material. So we say the process of bhakti is not material. And then it works out fine. Process of jnana is material. It cannot get you out. Right? Process of bhakti is nirguna. It's beyond the gunas. Therefore, it can get you out of the material world. However, the whole process of bhakti, like the Vedas or the words of the Vedas, look like they're material. So we're using material eyes to see the deity. That's the process of bhakti. We're using the voice to utter words, sounds, kirtan, that look like material sound waves. So we're using material senses. We're using material mind to meditate on a form of the Lord. So then again, it looks like, well, it's all material. What's the difference? Because these activities are bhakti. The material senses do not act in the same way through the process of bhakti. And so the words also do not act in the same way. The sound of the Vedas do not act in the same way when we have devotion. They become transformed. How is that? Shakti of the Supreme Lord can do impossible things. So our senses act differently when they perform bhakti for the Lord, because bhakti is nirguna. So therefore, the senses become spiritualized. And when we engage the senses in bhakti, then we don't get a material result, we get a spiritual result. So the immediate spiritual result of engaging the senses, which are so-called material in devotional service, is that the soul develops bhakti. That's the whole spiritual effect. And because of the bhakti, the Lord has mercy on the jiva, and the Lord encourages the jiva until he gets out of the material world and goes to the spiritual world. So the whole process is spiritual. Only problem is we're starting out with material consciousness and ignorance. So that's why it takes time. We have to counteract and ultimately destroy the karma, the ignorance, etc., that is in the subtle body and covering the jiva. So that is also accomplished by the process of bhakti. It doesn't need any other process to do that. So by the process of bhakti, then gradually we get the effect of bhakti growing within the jiva, like a plant, or like a flower, gradually blossoming. And simultaneously we get the destruction of ignorance, karma, etc. Subtle body of the jiva. All takes place by the process of bhakti. So that's expressed in the nectar devotion with the first two qualities of bhakti, kleshagni and subhada, the destruction of the bad things and production of the good things. It's production of bhakti and all wonderful spiritual qualities, destruction of karma, ignorance, ahankara, all these things take place with the production of bhakti. And when does it start? Even at sadhana stage. Beginning of sadhana starts. Why? Because Shakti of the Lord, it can do this. Okay? So therefore, when we perform bhakti, the jiva is engaging the internal Shakti of the Lord, the Antaranga Shakti of the Lord. And this makes the process very special, different from Jnana and Karma Yoga, etc. Very, very different type of process. Therefore, the ultimate answer to this question is quite simple for us when we understand how bhakti can transform everything, and the Lord can transform everything suitable for the Lord's purposes.
Layman question. Matter and spirit, they don't get along together.
Huh?
Matter and spirit,
Yeah.
like oil and water. The question may arise that how is the spirit being encased inside the material body? It looks like matter is more stronger. It's been caught and it's not able to act and do anything.
Yeah. Well, the nature of the jiva, he's spiritual, but he's not spiritual like the Lord. He is chit, but he is called tatashta. He's a little bit different also. So we compare the Supreme Lord to the sun, and the jiva to a small photon with an ray of the sun's light. That's all. So they're similar, but they're also somewhat different because the jiva is a little particle only, and the Lord is the cause of everything. So that particle is dependent on the Lord. So the nature of that particle, by his very composition of being the small particle, is he can be attracted to the Lord, but he can also be attracted to Maya, which means he can accept that the Lord is the independent source of everything and he is the eternal servant of the Lord, or he can reject that he is the eternal servant of the Lord and think, I am my own independent being and I can enjoy on my own. These are what the jiva can do. So he has this capacity to live in the spiritual world or the material world by his very constitution. That's why it's called tatashta. He's in between. However, some of the jivas are in the spiritual world, and they're called nityasiddhas, and they never make any other choice except the Supreme Lord, because that's the nature of the spiritual world. So they never make another choice. Why? Because the Lord empowers them with his chit shakti. So the bhakti actually is the chit shakti of the Lord, and when it becomes powerful enough, it sticks to the jiva permanently. And therefore, he's a different jiva. He's not the same as the jiva in the material world. Chit shakti anugrahita jiva is the nityasiddha. The jiva in the material world does not have that bhakti or that shakti with him. So why the jivas are like that? Because they choose that. They choose not the Lord, but they choose to enjoy separately. So then, that is expressed in this verse where it talks about the Lord creates the material world with the senses, etc., for the jiva, for material enjoyment or for liberation. So the Lord gives a chance to the jiva in the material world. You can enjoy here with your senses, or you can use the same senses to get out of the material world. You can use words, ear, voice, eye, etc., to get out of the material world also. So he gives them a chance, even by covering them up with a gross body and subtle body. He also gives them a chance to get out of that position using that same facility. Plus, of course, the bhakti which the Lord puts in the material world. So this is the constitution of the jiva, that he can be subject to this material world. But even in the jiva in the material world, if he develops bhakti and it becomes fixed in prema, then he gets the chit shakti also as part of himself. And then he becomes eternally part of the spiritual world. That's the sadhana siddha. He doesn't fall from that position. So the jiva, we can say, can take either choice, and then because of that, he's a little bit different. He's one with the Shakti, one without the Shakti.
In many parts of Bhagavatam we find this Brahman is discussed in many parts. Is it because in that assembly of Parishit and Sukadev, a lot of Brahmavadis to please them, or
there are whole sections on Jnana in Kapila's teachings, even in Krishna's teachings to Uddhava, whole sections that look very impersonal. And then we have sections on Karma Yoga and a whole discussion of Varnashram by Krishna himself to Uddhava, And on yoga also, he describes not just 8 cities, but 22 cities you can get from yoga, like this. So he describes all these processes, as Bhagavad Gita also discusses. Because there are people of different qualifications, and we see that there's a whole section of Karma Kanda in the Vedas also, as well as Gyan Kanda and Bhakti. So he covers everything. And some people are qualified for that, therefore it gives them an opportunity to become happy by hearing about those things. And if they want, they can become absorbed in those things. I think that's the conclusion of Bhagavatam also, but then that's their misfortune because they won't go beyond that. But nevertheless, they're qualified for something else. So he gives them that satisfaction. And this is one way also of hiding the ultimate meaning for persons who are not qualified.
There will be danger in this because some may take up only Brahman, they will not go beyond that.
Yeah.
Because it is there.
Yeah. So ultimately, Bhagavatam is meant for rasikas. It's not meant for impersonalists. Okay? So therefore, the impersonalists will read the impersonal section, be satisfied, and won't question anything else, and they'll think all the rasas, oh, that's material, and we'll just do our impersonal thing. So they don't get disturbed that way. So it is hiding the truth. This is like Mohini. Bhagavatam is like Mohini. It hides the truth from the people that don't have bhakti. And it gives the truth to the people that who have bhakti. So the nectar, like Mohini gives the nectar to the devatas.
Guru Maharaj, here in the purport it is said that one who cultivates this science of the Supreme with reverence, it doesn't talk about love and affection there. So does it mean that only those who have the policy of Vaidhi Bhakti and reverence will get it?
With, what was it? With...
One who cultivates this science of the Supreme with reverence.
With reverence. Oh, well, reverence has, of course, a wide variety of meanings, but here reverence means just like even if we're Raganuga Bhaktas, still we think of the jiva in a separate position from the Supreme Lord. It's necessary for bhakti itself. So in that sense, there's reverence. And then when we take to knowledge, we have to have reverence for the authority, like the guru, etc. So there has to be a certain amount of respect there before we can get knowledge. So there's always a respect for the Supreme Lord in one sense, because we have to go through a certain system of getting that knowledge. And we have to regard that knowledge as very sacred. We can't take it casually, so we have to understand it's a very high type of thing, and therefore we seriously practice it. So even in Raganuga Bhakti then, which is, we can say, a higher secret, so rahasya, then we have to respect that secret. And thus, it is not given to everybody. It's given to certain people by the guru, and other people they may not give it. So, in that sense, it's also respected. It's a privilege for certain people who are qualified.
And Guru Maharaj, one more question. That some people depict Raganuga Bhakti to be meant for the lower peoples of the society.
Who?
Interpreters, they say that Raganuga Bhakti is meant for the lower society of the people of the society.
Oh, well, we can talk about sahajiyas and stuff like that, but actually, people may think, not just Raganuga, may think that Lord Chaitanya's movement is Raganuga and Raganuga is for low-class people. They may think like that. That is because in the name of Raganuga, then they went off in other things like sahajiya-type tendencies, and we have the owls and the bowels and so many other people, and they'll think, oh, those are Lord Chaitanya's followers, but they're completely unconventional in terms of society, and they do all sorts of strange activities. So in that sense, people may associate Lord Chaitanya's movement like that, but that's actually not Lord Chaitanya's movement to begin with, so that's quite different. So the actual practice of Raganuga, as we can say, is quite conservative, and we can compare the two, the Sahajiya with the real Raganuga Bhakta. And we take the Goswamis as examples of that. So they were very strict. They were ideal sadhus and renunciates and whatever like that. And at the same time, we're giving a performance of what we call Raganuga Bhakti. So it is a little bit different from some people's conception, that's all. So not low class at all. Now, people may think that the Raganuga is more emotional, and therefore that's low class, and that to have reverence for the Lord is better. That's a preference. So people who are inclined to Vaidhi Bhakti will think that Raganuga Bhakti is too emotional, sentimental. We don't like that. And then people on the other hand who Raganuga, they're too formal and stiff in their mechanical in their worship, etc., like that. There are too much rules and regulations. So it's a matter of preference for Vaidhi or Raganuga, which is a taste. So some people are attracted to one, some to another.
They were arguing that this sort of devotion was given only to the Vaishyas and the women.
Well, that's one thing, not just Vaishyas and women, because we see that Lord Chaitanya's associates, there were a large section of Brahmanas. Advaitacharya, Srivas Pandit, Gadadhar Pandit, they're all from Brahmin families. There were also Vaishyas there, and Sudras, and so many other people were also there. But there were a large section of Brahmana followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And actually, we get all the lines of Diksha were Brahmin lines, actually, that came out. So we'll find that all the Goswami lines of Diksha were Brahmins also. So it's not that there weren't any Brahmins. They did have, and Lord Chaitanya was a Brahmin also. The Goswamis came from Brahmin families, actually, from South India, Carnatic Brahmins, actually. So, it's not that they were all low-class people. Now, they did, because of Lord Chaitanya's teachings, that Sankirtan is open for everybody, and that Varna is not the consideration, it is the Bhakti which is the consideration. Therefore, it was a free movement, something like Buddhism, because it didn't have caste. People got interested in it, the lower classes, they supported that because they were thinking they were persecuted by the Kshatriyas and the Brahmanas at the top. So then they would naturally take to something which was a little more liberal for them. So it attracted the lower class people also because it had this idea of, Bhakti is higher than Varna. So it attracted those people also. Yeah? But it didn't exclude the Brahmins.
One more argument was that Ragana Bhakti doesn't have place in the Upanishads, whereas it's only said in the Puranas, where the
Raganuga.
Bhagavad Purana. So the Puranas are meant for the lower categories of people.
No, same knowledge. The idea is that the Puranas are meant for the people of Kali Yuga particularly because it's easier and accessible to people of lower castes, etc. They can all read. But the knowledge is exactly the same. It is not inferior knowledge because of that. So it's the same knowledge conveyed in a different way so that everybody can accept it and study it, etc. So it's not inferior knowledge because of that. So therefore, whatever is in the Vedas should be in the Puranas, etc. So if Raganuga is in the Puranas, it should also be in the Vedas. They don't introduce anything new. It's the same. So that's why we say the Bhagavatam is the essence of everything. It's non-different from the Vedas. So whatever is there, you can trace it back to the Vedas. So therefore, we can trace rasa back to the Vedas, as we have with Taittiriya Upanishad. Rasa Vaisaha, the Lord is rasa. And by that, the jiva gets bliss, whatever. So, therefore, we can ultimately trace everything back to the Vedas. However, as I said, the Vedas often speak, as the Upanishad says, parokshavad. They don't say everything directly. So, therefore, we have to interpret some things there. But nevertheless, there are statements like rasa vaisaha, etc., which talk about the rasa of the Lord. Other statements talk about a cowherd boy playing in Vrindavan, etc. So there are statements there.
Something basic, Maharaj. We say that Krishna has mentioned about this. And again, we know that the quality of the Atma is consciousness. But what is the shape of the Atma?
Yeah. So size, of course, is a material consideration. Ultimately, that's to show us that the Lord is very great and the jiva is very powerless, or in comparison, he hasn't got size, quality, whatever. He's much inferior to the Supreme Lord. Ultimately, we cannot even measure the Lord or the jiva in the spiritual world because it's beyond space and time of a material world, so it doesn't make any sense in one. So, nevertheless, we talk about the form of the Lord and we talk about the form of the jiva. But again, it's not like the material form because the form of the Lord is not limited. Krishna may be so high with a particular arm and a leg and a thing which limits him. But again, it's spiritual, so he's not limited. So we have to be careful when we carry over concepts of form from the material world to the spiritual world. It's quite different. So Krishna has a limited form in the spiritual world, but then he's unlimited and he's everything also, simultaneously. He contains everything in the spiritual world and in the material world. And he's still a limited form like that. So form also is a little bit different from us. So form actually is ultimately an expression of rasa again. Right? So we take a particular form in the spiritual world because of a particular rasa. So if you're a Madhurya rasa, you take a gopi form or manjari form, and if you're in Sakya rasa, you take a cowherd boy form like that. And so, and again, those forms aren't limited like material world forms.
So what happens to the jiva when it is in the material world and the material body? What form it does have?
Does not manifest much at all. So if you get into Brahman, again, no form manifests. So it only manifests when you do bhakti and you develop a relationship with the Lord. Then you develop a spiritual body with spiritual senses so you can perceive the Lord and serve the Lord. The impersonal doesn't want to serve the Lord, so nothing develops. Potential is there, but nothing develops.
In the Vedas, regarding Vedas, Lord Krishna says in Gita, Traigunya Vishya Veda, this Traigunya Bhavajana. Vedas are full of three modes. That means what is the percentage of bhakti in Vedas?
Yeah. So there are some sections of the Vedas that deal with material things, and that's the Karma Kanda. And then Krishna says, well, this is the flowery words of the Vedas, etc., and rise above this. So the commentaries of our acharyas are always, yes, this is one part of the Vedas, but that doesn't mean we should reject all of the Vedas because of that. So yes, a large section is, I can't say what percentage is there, but maybe one third of the section is the Karma Kanda section. Then there's, of course, the Samhita section itself, the Upasana Kanda. We can say that people have a tendency to interpret that also as material because it's descriptions of devatas, etc. But then Vaishnavas take those same verses and they will say, well, actually, when you talk about Indra and all these other devatas, ultimately it means Supreme Lord. So all the names of the devatas are ultimately name of the Supreme Lord. So they say the whole Vedas is glorifying Supreme Lord. That's Madhva's interpretation. So he starts commenting on the Vedas and say, okay, this means you think it's a devata. No, it's the Shiva's Vishnu, actually. Or Brahma is Vishnu, or Indra is Vishnu. So when it talks about these different praises of the different devatas, so then we can say the Upasana Kanda is all bhakti also. So then we get the Jnana Kanda. So there we get discussion of Brahman, but then we take the Brahman ultimately as Bhagavan. So then we'll say, okay, that section is also, we can say some is Jnana and some is bhakti. So we can say that we can 1/3 is the karma, and then maybe 1/3 Jnana and 1/3 bhakti.
Bhakti, is the bhakti covered in the Vedas?
Right?
It's been covered in the Vedas, the bhakti?
Yeah. So we have Upanishads like Svetasvara Upanishad, Mahanarayan Upanishad, different Upanishads. Then we have, of course, the whole Vaishnava Upanishads are there. And the famous one is Gopal Tapani Upanishad, which is directly about Krishna and Bhakti. It's also from the Atharva Veda. Now, of course, Shankaracharya doesn't consider these Vaishnava Upanishads at all. He just takes 10 Upanishads. But there are a group on Vishnu and Krishna, and there's even a Gopi Chandan Upanishad. There's a Krishna Upanishad, there's a Garuda Upanishad, some different Upanishads like that. Of course, there's also some Shaivite Upanishads, there's also some Shakti Upanishads, there's also some Sannyas Upanishads. There's different groups of Upanishads there describing different, topics.
I'll give the example of magnet and iron particle. When the magnet is with the iron particle, after some time, the iron particle becomes magnetic. And we say when we use our senses for Rishikesh service, Lord service, the body becomes spiritual. But we know that body, matter and spirit cannot go along. Is it just an analogy meaning, or really it becomes?
When we engage the body in the service, or it is spiritualized, we don't say it becomes spirit. And therefore, even if you get prema, you still have a material body as such. It does not act for sense enjoyment, so we don't call it material. Everything becomes dedicated to the Supreme Lord. But it's material. And therefore, at a certain point, the devotee gives up that body completely, and he never comes back to material bodies at all. He separates from the gross body and the subtle body. But as long as he's functioning in that subtle body and gross body, the Prem Bhakta, those they don't function for material sense enjoyment anymore. They only function for his, let's say, maintenance of his body as long as he continues, so he can experience prema. So that's their only use, in one sense. That's just for prema bhakta. So the matter never transforms into something else, but it loses its negative material functions, we can say, and never acts as an obstacle or a maya for that particular jiva.
But when the Lord descends here, he comes to complete spiritual body. When he takes avatar, when we see in Puranas when Lord gets hurt, blood comes from his finger.
How
is it?
Yeah, so that is commented on by acharyas. They say those statements are there for the foolish people, so they can think that Krishna has a material body. But it's contradicted directly by other statements that he cannot be cut. Even the soul cannot be cut, cannot be whatever, dried up, cannot be burned. So how can the Lord get injured and have blood and have a wound or whatever, and can be bewildered? No, never. The very definition of the Lord forbids that. So therefore, those statements are there to bewilder the lesser people. This again is, we can say, parokshavad, there to confuse people that have lower consciousness.
দয়াল নিতাই চৈতন্য বলে নাচ রে আমার মন, নিতাই চৈতন্য বলে নাচ রে আমার মন, 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 নিতাই চৈতন্য বলে নাচ রে আমার মন, নিতাই চৈতন্য বলে নাচ রে আমার মন। এমন দয়াল তো নাই হে, এমন দয়াল তো নাই হে, মার খেয়ে প্রেম দেয় এমন দয়াল তো নাই হে। ওরে অপরাধ দূরে যাবে পাবে প্রেম ধন, অপরাধ দূরে যাবে পাবে প্রেম ধন, নিতাই চৈতন্য বলে নাচ রে আমার মন, নিতাই চৈতন্য বলে নাচ রে আমার মন। ও নামে অপরাধ বিচার তো নাই হে, ও নামে অপরাধ বিচার তো নাই হে। তখন কৃষ্ণ নামে রুচি হবে ঘুচিবে বন্ধন, কৃষ্ণ নামে রুচি হবে ঘুচিবে বন্ধন, দয়াল নিতাই চৈতন্য বলে নাচ রে আমার মন, নিতাই চৈতন্য বলে নাচ রে আমার মন। কৃষ্ণ নামে অনুরাগ তো হবে হে, কৃষ্ণ নামে অনুরাগ তো হবে হে। তখন অনায়াসে সফল হবে জীবের জীবন, অনায়াসে সফল হবে জীবের জীবন, দয়াল নিতাই চৈতন্য বলে নাচরে আমার মন, নিতাই চৈতন্য বলে নাচরে আমার মন। কৃষ্ণের অতি বিনা জীবন তো মিছে হে, কৃষ্ণের অতি বিনা জীবন তো মিছে হে। শেষে বৃন্দাবনে রাধা শ্যামে পাবে দর্শন, বৃন্দাবনে রাধা শ্যামে পাবে দর্শন। গৌর কৃপা হলে হে, গৌর কৃপা হলে হে, শেষে বৃন্দাবনে রাধা শ্যামে পাবে দর্শন, শেষে বৃন্দাবনে রাধা শ্যামে পাবে দর্শন। নিতাই চৈতন্য বলে নাচরে আমার মন।